I never imagined that a phone call could turn my life upside down, but that's exactly what happened. It was a crisp autumn afternoon in Chicago. When I saw Mook, it was clear she had a hidden agenda. "I just wanted to let you know," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of mockery. "I'm sure you're busy with your modest life." I could almost hear her smirking through the phone. Her words stung, but I tried not to let it show. "Thank you for letting me know. I'll make arrangements to come." It wasn't just her words that stung, it was the memories they dredged up. Growing up, Isabella was always the golden child. She had our father's favor and a certain charm that seemed to make everything fall into place for her. As for me, I was often left in the shadow. Even though I tried my best to excel, my efforts seemed to be overlooked. Isabella and I hadn't spoken much in years. After she had stolen David from me, I had cut ties with her and, by extension, with the rest of my family. It wasn't just about the betrayal, it was about how it highlighted the unequal treatment I had always felt. David Parker had been my fiancé. He was the love of my life, and we had a future planned together. That was until Isabella, with her manipulative charm, came into the picture. David had left me for her, and I had been devastated. It wasn't just a broken relationship, it was a betrayal that left scars. Our family had always been fractured. Our father, stern and unyielding, had favored Isabella for her resemblance to him. My mother, although caring, was often caught in the middle. She tried to show support, but it was clear that Isabella had always been the preferred child. I had chosen a different path after the breakup. I left my job as a school administrator to focus on raising my daughter, Lily. John, my husband, was a supportive tech executive who loved me for who I was. We had a cozy home in the suburbs and a life that, while modest, was filled with love. Lily, our 6-year-old daughter, was a bright spot in our lives. She had a passion for drawing and even had a popular YouTube channel where she shared her artwork with the world. Despite the success in my personal life, the call from Isabella brought back a wave of old emotions. The thought of returning to the family home for the funeral filled me with apprehension. I hadn't been there in years, and the memories were bittersweet. Our grandmother had always been a beacon of kindness in our family. She was the one person who had supported me unconditionally. Her death marked the end of an era, and now, with Isabella's call, it felt like I was being dragged back into a world I had tried to leave behind. I spent the next few days preparing for the trip. The thought of seeing Isabella again filled me with a mix of dread and anticipation. It was not just about the funeral, it was about facing the family dynamics that had shaped so much of my life. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Isabella's call than just the announcement of our grandmother's passing. When the day of the funeral arrived, I found myself standing in front of the old family home. The house looked exactly as I remembered it, unchanged and yet somehow different. It was as if the walls held the echoes of our childhood, the echoes of laughter and fights, of dreams and disappointments. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with grief and nostalgia. I saw familiar faces, some filled with sorrow and others marked by hidden agendas. As I moved through the crowd, I caught sight of Isabella, her eyes scanning the room with a practiced indifference. She was surrounded by people who seemed to hang on her every word, her charm as potent as ever. I watched her with a sense of unease. Despite the years and the distance, it felt like we were still locked in the same old struggle. Isabella's presence was a stark reminder of the family dynamics that had always been a part of my life. In the middle of the ceremony, as the eulogies were being delivered, Isabella managed to corner me. "Samantha," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "it's been a while." I forced a smile in return. "Yes, it has. How have you been?" "Oh, you know," she replied, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Life has been interesting." I could sense the undercurrent in her words, the same old rivalry that had never truly faded. As I looked at her, I realized that this reunion was not just about mourning our grandmother. It was about confronting the past, the betrayals, and the choices that had shaped both of our lives. Little did I know that this encounter would set the stage for revelations that would challenge everything I thought I knew about my sister and our family. The days leading up to the funeral were filled with tension and unresolved feelings. I tried to focus on my family, John, Lily, and our daily routines, but it was impossible to ignore the looming reunion with Isabella and the family I had distanced myself from. The familiar, yet painful, echoes of the past were all too real. On the day of the funeral, the air was thick with grief and unresolved emotions. The family home was filled with relatives and acquaintances, all paying their respects. The house, with its worn charm, seemed to watch over us like an old friend holding secrets. The walls felt heavy with the weight of past arguments, laughter, and hidden truths. As I entered the living room, I felt Isabella's eyes on me. Her presence was as imposing as ever, her polished exterior masking the deep-seated rivalry that had always existed between us. It wasn't long before she approached me again, her smile now more genuine, but still carrying an edge. "I've been meaning to catch up," Isabella said, her voice carrying a note of curiosity. "It's been a while since we've had a chance to talk." I forced a smile, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Yes, it has. How have things been for you?" "Oh, you know," Isabella replied with a wave of her hand. "Busy. But good. I'm sure you've heard from the family about how things have been for me." I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure what she was referring to. The last I had heard from our parents, Isabella was living a life of luxury in Los Angeles. The stories I heard seemed to paint a picture of success and perfection, but I knew better than to take them at face value. During the wake, Isabella made a point of flaunting her perceived success. She spoke of her life in Los Angeles, her upscale lifestyle, and her supposed achievements. It was as though she was trying to outshine everyone, to prove that her life was better than mine. I watched her with a mix of curiosity and irritation. I knew that beneath her confident facade lay a tangled web of lies and manipulations. It was hard to ignore how she spoke about David Parker, my former fiancé and now her ex-husband. Her casual mentions of him, her attempts to show how unaffected she was by their failed marriage, felt like salt in an old wound. David had once been the center of my world. We had been planning a future together until Isabella, with her cunning and charm, had stolen him away. The betrayal had left me heartbroken and disillusioned. Seeing Isabella flaunt her life so casually was a painful reminder of the hurt I had tried to move past. I decided to confront Isabella about the past, hoping to find some closure. As the crowd began to thin out, I pulled her aside into a quiet corner of the house. "Isabella, can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I need to understand why," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Why did you have to take David from me? What was it that made you think you could just take him away?" Isabella's expression shifted from faux cheerfulness to something colder, more calculating. "Samantha, it's not about taking anything. David and I had our own connection. You just didn't see it. You manipulated him," I said, my voice rising with emotion. "You knew how much I loved him." She shrugged nonchalantly. "David made his own choices. You have to move on, Samantha. Life doesn't wait for anyone." Her dismissive attitude was infuriating. "You never understood, did you? It wasn't just about David. It was about how you always seemed to have everything handed to you while I was left struggling." Isabella's face hardened. "Don't blame me for your shortcomings. We all have our battles. Maybe if you had been more assertive, things would have been different." Her words felt like a stab in the dark, hitting all the old wounds that had never fully healed. I wanted to lash out, but I took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. This isn't just about David. It's about our family, the way things have always been stacked against me. Before Isabella could respond, I was interrupted by the arrival of some distant relatives. I had no choice but to step away, the confrontation unresolved. The rest of the evening was a blur of faces and condolences, but my mind was occupied with thoughts of the past and the unresolved issues between Isabella and me. The next day, as the funeral came to a close, I felt a sense of both relief and apprehension. The family dynamics were as tangled as ever, and I knew that there was more to uncover. Isabella's perfect life was beginning to crack, and I was determined to see the truth come to light. I left the funeral with a heavy heart, but a renewed sense of purpose. There was more to this story, and I was prepared to face it head-on. The confrontation had set the stage for deeper revelations, and I was ready to uncover the full extent of the lies and deceptions that had shaped our lives. The days following the funeral were filled with an unsettling calm. I found myself replaying my confrontation with Isabella over and over, seeking clarity in the chaos. It was clear that the family's underlying issues were far from resolved. My mother's apology, though appreciated, did little to mend the rift that had existed for years. John and Lily were my anchor during this tumultuous time. They sensed my distress, but chose to offer comfort rather than prying into my troubles. Lily, with her innocent curiosity, continued to pour her heart into her YouTube channel, sharing her drawings with the world. Her joy was a bright spot amidst the darkness. It wasn't long before the next chapter of this saga unfolded. Isabella, ever the drama queen, took to social media to mock me subtly. Her posts were veiled in sarcasm, presenting herself as the picture of success, while implying that my life was dull and insignificant. It was frustrating to see her attempt to diminish my happiness in such a public way. That's when Lily's YouTube channel became a weapon in this battle. One evening, after a particularly cruel post from Isabella, Lily and I decided it was time to use her platform for more than just showcasing her drawings. I helped Lily create a video that countered Isabella's lies, focusing on the positive aspects of our life and subtly addressing the falsehoods Isabella was spreading. The video, while innocent on the surface, contained enough pointed references to make it clear that we were aware of Isabella's attempts to undermine us. It quickly gained traction, and soon, the comment sections of both Lily's channel and Isabella's posts were flooded with reactions. People began to see Isabella's facade for what it was, an elaborate mask hiding insecurities and deceptions. As the video went viral, Isabella's reputation started to crumble. The social media backlash was swift and harsh. Comments pointed out the discrepancies in her stories and questioned her integrity. The spotlight she had so carefully crafted was now exposing her vulnerabilities. Meanwhile, Isabella's personal life began to unravel in parallel. David, struggling with the public fallout from our confrontation and the negative attention surrounding his and Isabella's failed marriage, made a significant error at work. It led to his dismissal from his position as a software engineer. The professional and personal pressure became too much for him, and he fell into a deep spiral of self-doubt. Unable to cope with the financial and emotional strain, Isabella made a drastic decision. She filed for divorce, severing the final ties with David. Their son, James, became a casualty of this turmoil, and due to Isabella's unstable situation, he was placed into a care facility, a stark contrast to the privileged life she had once flaunted. The family dynamics were shifting rapidly. My mother, who had always been more sympathetic to me, approached me with a heartfelt apology for the past. She admitted that her favoritism towards Isabella had been a mistake, and she acknowledged the hurt it had caused. "I'm sorry for everything, Samantha," she said, her eyes filled with regret. "We should have done better by you." I see now how much pain we've caused. I appreciated her words, but the scars of the past were not easily healed. I chose to maintain a distant but cordial relationship with her, focusing on what truly mattered, my family's happiness and well-being. In the midst of these revelations, John and I decided to take a break from the chaos. We planned a joyful outing to an amusement park, a chance for Lily to enjoy herself and for us to reconnect as a family. It was a reminder of the simple joys and the love we shared. The trip was everything we needed, a day filled with laughter and bonding. It reinforced the strength of our family and highlighted the content life we had built together. It was a much-needed respite from the drama, and it reminded me of the importance of moving forward with love and support. As we enjoyed the day, I realized that while the past had its shadows, the future held the promise of light. With Isabella's downfall and the family's apologies, I felt a sense of closure. The journey was far from over, but for now, I could focus on cherishing the present and looking forward to a brighter future. The weeks after our trip to the amusement park brought a profound sense of calm. My life, once shaken by familial discord, was finding its equilibrium again. As I looked around at my little family, I realized how much we had grown through all the trials. Isabella's downfall was a hard pill to swallow, but it was a reminder of the destructive power of envy and manipulation. Her failed attempts to belittle my life had only served to bring her own downfall into the spotlight. The divorce, the loss of her son to a care facility, and her diminishing reputation were harsh consequences of the path she had chosen. David, once a part of my life and now a figure of past regrets, faced his own set of challenges. His dismissal from his job had left him struggling to find his footing. Yet, despite everything, there was a sense of detachment from my part. My focus had shifted entirely to my own family and the life we had worked so hard to build. John and I continued to nurture our relationship, finding strength in each other. Our daughter, Lily, thrived in her creative endeavors. Her YouTube channel remained a beacon of joy and positivity, helping to distract from the negativity that had surrounded us. Watching her grow and flourish was a constant reminder of what really mattered. One day, I received a letter from my mother. In it, she expressed her sorrow for the way things had unfolded and asked for forgiveness. Her apology was heartfelt, but I knew that mending our relationship would take time. I responded with kindness, acknowledging her regret while emphasizing the importance of moving forward. Our family dynamics had been altered permanently, but the experience had also brought clarity. My parents' favoritism towards Isabella and the subsequent fallout had taught me invaluable lessons about resilience and forgiveness. It was clear that healing from these wounds required more than just time. It required understanding and a willingness to let go of past grievances. In the quiet moments of reflection, I understood that the pain of the past had forged a stronger bond within my own family. John, Lily, and I were more connected than ever, and our shared experiences had deepened our appreciation for one another. We found solace in our daily routines and the small moments that brought us joy. As summer turned to fall, I began planning a new project, one that would honor the lessons learned and the family we had become. I started a community initiative focused on helping families navigate conflicts and build stronger relationships. It was a way to turn my experiences into something positive, offering support and guidance to others who might be facing similar challenges. Looking back, I saw how far we had come from those turbulent days. The confrontation at our grandmother's funeral, the subsequent revelations, and the social media battles had all led to a profound transformation. Isabella's story was a cautionary tale, but it was also a testament to the strength of my own resolve and the importance of moving forward with love. As I closed the final chapter of the story, I felt a sense of closure. The journey had been arduous, but it had also been enlightening. The road ahead was filled with promise, and I was ready to embrace it with an open heart. In the end, it was the love of my family and the lessons learned that had guided me through. With John by my side, Lily's laughter brightening our days, and the community project taking shape, I knew that the future was ours to shape. And as I looked forward, I carried with me the certainty that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, our family's strength and unity would guide us through.
This story is titled, My Mother-in-Law Moved Into My House, Started Making New Rules, and Even Threw Away My Brother's Ashes. I kicked her out, but now that I'm pregnant, she wants to see my child. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. You ever meet someone who decides they hate you before you even say a word? That's Linda, 53 female, my mother-in-law. From the second I walked into her house, I could feel her icy, "Oh, you're not who I pictured for my son" vibe. And honestly, I should have run right then. But nope, I stayed, tried to play nice, and now I'm here to tell you just how far Linda went to make my life hell, and how I made sure she'd never do it again. If you think Linda hated me now, let me tell you. She's been at this game since day one. Her distaste for me started the second Ryan brought me home to meet her. I'm Priya, 28 female, Indian American, born and raised in Chicago. My family has been here for 4 generations, but to Linda, I might as well have been fresh off the boat. She's the type of person who believes her son deserved a pure, wholesome, church-going white girl. And I was none of that. Ryan, 28 male, and I met in college. He was the charming, all-American guy with an easy laugh and kind eyes, and I was the girl who could hold my own in any debate. We clicked instantly, and it didn't take long for us to fall in love. When Ryan decided it was time for me to meet his mom, I was nervous but hopeful. I knew his family came from a small town, but I naively believed they'd see me for who I was, a hard-working, loving woman who adored their son. I was wrong. From the moment I walked through her door, Linda was polite, but it was that frosty, fake polite, where every word feels like a test. "Oh, you're Priya," she said, her smile a little too tight. "Ryan's told me a bit about you." A bit felt like code for everything I don't like about you. I smiled anyway, trying to make a good impression. Dinner that night was straight out of a rom-com gone wrong. Linda grilled me with questions about my background. "What do your parents do?" "Oh, they own a small business? That must be nice. Do you plan to visit back home often?" "Back home?" I told her I was born here, but she acted like I hadn't said anything. Then came the food comments. Linda had made a bland roast with mashed potatoes and boiled green beans. When I politely asked for salt, her face fell like I'd slapped her. "Is it not flavorful enough for you?" she asked, her tone dripping with passive aggression. Ryan jumped in to defend me, saying, "Mom, Priya's just used to different kinds of food. She's not criticizing." But Linda wasn't done. She turned to Ryan and said, "You used to love this meal when Becky made it for you." Who the hell was Becky? As it turned out, Becky was Ryan's high school sweetheart. She was blonde, bubbly, and everything Linda wanted in a daughter-in-law. By the time I met Linda, Becky was married to someone else, but that didn't stop Linda from treating her like she was still part of the family. Linda brought her up constantly. "Becky just sent me the sweetest card for my birthday," she'd say. Or, "I ran into Becky at the grocery store. She said to tell you hi, Ryan." At first, I brushed it off. It wasn't Becky's fault that Linda was obsessed with her. But then Linda started pushing boundaries. One day, while Ryan and I were engaged, he got a text from Becky. It was innocent enough. She wanted advice about a work project, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Linda had something to do with it. Ryan didn't think much of it, but I knew Linda. She was scheming. A week later, it all came out. Linda casually mentioned over dinner, "Oh, I gave Becky your number, Ryan. She said she needed help, and I figured you wouldn't mind." I was furious. "Linda, you had no right to do that," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Linda blinked at me, feigning innocence. "What's the big deal? Becky's practically family." "She's not family," Ryan said firmly. "And you don't get to make decisions like that without asking me, or Priya." Linda huffed and changed the subject, but the damage was done. It wasn't just about Becky. It was about control. Linda couldn't stand that Ryan was choosing me over the life she'd imagined for him. When Ryan proposed, Linda didn't even pretend to be happy. She didn't call to congratulate us, didn't ask about the ring, didn't offer to help with the wedding. Instead, she sulked for weeks and avoided our calls. When she finally did talk to Ryan, she tried to talk him out of marrying me. "You're rushing into this," she said. "Marriage is a big step. Are you sure you've thought it through?" Ryan wasn't having it. "Mom, I love Priya. We're getting married. You can either be part of it, or you can sit this one out." Linda reluctantly agreed to come to our engagement party. But of course, she couldn't just behave. She showed up late, dressed in black. Yes, black, like she was mourning, and spent the entire evening talking to her cousins about how different the wedding was going to be. At one point, I overheard her telling one of her friends, "I just hope Ryan knows what he's doing. Marrying someone with such a different culture can be complicated." By the time the wedding rolled around, I was ready for anything Linda could throw at me. Or so I thought. She made a scene about everything. The guest list, the menu, the music. "Do we really need to have Indian food at the reception?" she asked Ryan. "Can't we just do something neutral, like steak and potatoes?" Ryan shut that down quickly. "Mom, this is Priya's wedding too. We're having Indian food, and that's final." On the day of the wedding, Linda tried to outdo me by wearing an elaborate black gown that looked more suited for a Hollywood premiere than a family wedding. She refused to smile in the photos, barely spoke to my parents, and left the reception early without saying goodbye. It hurt, but I refused to let her ruin my day. Ryan and I were married, and that was all that mattered. Fast forward 3 years, and I thought we'd moved past the worst of it. Linda still made her passive-aggressive comments whenever she visited, but Ryan and I had learned to tune her out. We were happy in our little home, building a life together. Then Linda's condo HOA drama happened. Apparently, she'd been feuding with her neighbors for months. Something about property lines and fence heights. One day she called Ryan in tears, saying she needed a place to stay while she sorted things out. Ryan, being the kind-hearted guy he is, offered to let her move in temporarily. "Just until she finds a new place," he said. "I know it's a lot to ask, but she's my mom." I sighed, already dreading what was to come. "Fine. But you need to set boundaries, Ryan. This is our home, not hers." He promised he would, but promises are easy to make. Keeping them? That's a whole different story. When Linda showed up at our doorstep, I knew I was in for trouble. It wasn't the first time she had barged into my life with her opinions and entitlement, but this was different. This time, she wasn't just visiting. She was moving in. Her car was packed to the brim with suitcases, boxes, and random household items, like she was preparing for a year-long vacation. I peeked out the window and groaned. "Ryan, please tell me she didn't bring her entire house." Ryan rubbed his temples, already exasperated. "I told her it was just temporary. She's probably just overpacking, like she always does." Temporary or not, this felt like the beginning of a nightmare. Linda breezed into the house as if she owned it. She gave me a once-over, her eyes lingering just a second too long on my leggings and oversized sweatshirt. "Oh, Priya, you look comfortable," she said, her voice dripping with judgment. "Nice to see you too, Linda," I replied, forcing a smile. Ryan helped her bring in her bags. 6 oversized suitcases, 3 boxes labeled fragile, and a laundry basket filled with throw pillows and blankets. She immediately began inspecting the house like she was conducting a real estate appraisal. "You've changed the furniture since I was last here," she noted, running her fingers along the back of the couch. "It's modern. Not quite my style, but I guess it works for you two." "It's functional," I said, biting back the urge to roll my eyes. She wandered into the kitchen next, opening cabinets and drawers without asking. "Oh, Priya, you still have that spice rack? You really ought to get something more neutral. This one just screams ethnic." "Because it's mine," I said through clenched teeth. Ryan shot me an apologetic look, but Linda was oblivious. She was too busy rearranging my kitchen. When Linda finally finished inspecting the house, I showed her to the guest room we'd prepared for her. It was small but cozy, with a full-sized bed, fresh linens, and a little desk by the window. "This is it?" she asked, wrinkling her nose. "Yes, this is the guest room," I replied. She walked in, turning in a slow circle like she was sizing up a prison cell. "It's so compact. Are you sure there's nothing bigger?" "It's the only room available," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "What about the office?" she asked, pointing down the hall. "The office is where we work," I said firmly, "and it's much smaller than this room." She sighed dramatically, plopping down on the bed. "Well, I suppose I'll make do, but I'll need a better mattress. This one is far too firm." "It's a brand new mattress," I said, my patience wearing thin. "For guests," she shot back. "Not for someone staying long-term." "Temporary," Ryan corrected her. "You're staying temporarily, Mom." She ignored him, Within hours, it became clear that Linda wasn't going to just settle in quietly. She immediately started unpacking, filling the guest room with so much of her stuff that it looked like she was setting up a permanent residence. She hung up her own curtains, replaced the bedding I had put out with her own, more comfortable set, and even brought in a small coffee maker because, apparently, walking to the kitchen was too inconvenient. But it didn't stop there. Linda had a habit of treating every room like it was hers. She'd leave her coffee cup on the living room table, her shoes in the hallway, and her mail on the kitchen counter. It was like she was marking her territory. One evening, I came downstairs to find her rearranging the framed photos on our bookshelf. She had moved a picture of Ryan and me on our wedding day to the back of the shelf and replaced it with a photo of Ryan and Becky at his high school prom. "Linda, what are you doing?" I asked, barely keeping my voice steady. "Oh, I was just tidying up," she said, smiling innocently. "This picture of Ryan and Becky is so much nicer, don't you think?" "No, I don't," I said, grabbing the photo and shoving it back into the drawer where it belonged. "Our wedding photos stay where they are." Linda sighed, as if I were the unreasonable one. "You're so sensitive, Priya. It's just a picture." "It's my house," I snapped. The kitchen became a battleground almost immediately. Cooking has always been my passion, and Ryan loves my food. But Linda? She had a problem with everything I made. "Priya, are you cooking again?" she asked one evening, wrinkling her nose at the smell of cumin and coriander. "The whole house smells like spices." "It smells like dinner," I said, stirring the pot of curry on the stove. "Well, maybe you could open a window next time," she said. "You don't want these smells clinging to the walls." Ryan overheard and stepped in. "Mom, Priya's cooking is amazing. If you don't like it, you don't have to eat it." Linda crossed her arms, looking offended. "I'm just saying, Ryan. I don't know how you can handle all that heat. You've always had such a sensitive stomach." "I don't," Ryan said firmly. But Linda wasn't done. She started suggesting easier meals I could make. Read bland. "Why don't you try making something simple like meatloaf or maybe a nice casserole? Ryan used to love those when Becky made them." And there it was again. Becky. Linda couldn't stop bringing up Becky even after all these years. It was like she thought if she mentioned her enough, Ryan would magically change his mind about me. One afternoon, while Ryan was out, Linda came into the kitchen while I was baking. "I saw Becky the other day," she said casually, leaning against the counter. "Good for her," I said, not looking up from the dough I was kneading. "She's doing so well," Linda continued. "She just got a promotion at work, and she mentioned that she still thinks about Ryan sometimes." I froze, my hands stopping mid-knead. "What's your point, Linda?" "Oh, nothing," she said, her tone overly sweet. "I just think it's nice that she still cares about him. She was such a big part of his life, you know." I dropped the dough onto the counter and turned to face her. "Linda, Ryan and I are married. Becky is also married. She isn't part of his life anymore, and she never will be. So if you're trying to stir something up, don't bother." Linda's smile faltered for a second before she recovered. "I don't know why you're getting so defensive. I'm just reminiscing. That night, I told Ryan everything. He was furious." "She brought up Becky again?" he asked, his jaw tightening. "Of course she did," I said. "She's been trying to undermine me since the moment she got here." "I'll talk to her," Ryan promised. "This is crossing the line." But talking wasn't enough. Linda was digging her claws in, and I was starting to feel like a stranger in my own home. Linda had only been living with us for a few days, but it already felt like forever. I knew things were going to get worse before they got better, but I had no idea just how far she'd go to sabotage me. By the time Linda decided to destroy my pantry, I was already teetering on the edge of losing my mind. Every day with her was a fresh insult or passive-aggressive jab. She treated my home like it was a poorly managed hotel. And me? Like I was some unqualified housekeeper who'd stumbled into her son's life by accident. Still, I tried to keep the peace for Ryan's sake. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that she'd eventually get bored and leave. But what happened that morning made it crystal clear. Linda wasn't just difficult. She was out to erase me entirely. I woke up feeling unusually optimistic. I had plans to make biryani for dinner, a dish Ryan absolutely loved, and I'd even taken the time to prep the spices and marinate the chicken the night before. Cooking always gave me a sense of control, and with Linda's constant antics, I needed that small victory. But when I walked into the kitchen, my heart dropped. The pantry door was wide open, and all my carefully organized shelves were bare. At first, I thought I was seeing things. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and opened the cabinet again, hoping the spices would magically reappear. They didn't. My rice dispenser? Gone. The jars of lentils, the bags of flour, Even the small containers of dried herbs I'd tucked away for special dishes. Everything was missing. Panicking, I checked the fridge. It was the same story. All the paneer, yogurt, and vegetables I'd stocked up on were gone. The only things left were a carton of milk, a stick of butter, some eggs, and a loaf of bread. I stood there, frozen, as the realization hit me. Someone had cleared out my kitchen. Ryan wandered into the kitchen a few minutes later, still half asleep. "Morning," he said, grabbing a mug for coffee. "You okay? You look pale." "Where's all the food?" I asked, my voice shaking. Ryan frowned, looking into the pantry and fridge. "I have no idea. Did you move it?" Before I could answer, Linda walked in, carrying her coffee cup like she hadn't just committed a felony against my pantry. She looked at me, then at Ryan, and smiled. "Oh, you noticed," she said, like she was expecting gratitude. "Noticed what?" I snapped. "I cleaned out the kitchen," she said, setting her cup down. "All that stuff you had, those weird spices and whatever, it just wasn't suitable." Ryan's not used to eating that kind of food. I figured it was time to start fresh. Ryan's jaw dropped. "You did what?" Linda shrugged. "I threw it out. It was taking up so much space, and honestly, the smell was overpowering. Now you have room for normal groceries." "Normal groceries?" I said, my voice rising. "Linda, that was hundreds of dollars worth of food. Do you have any idea how long it took me to stock all of that?" Linda didn't even flinch. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Priya. You can buy more. Besides, I've already written up a list of things we actually need. Potatoes, canned soup, chicken breasts. You know, real food." Ryan stepped in, his voice sharp. "Mom, you had no right to touch any of that. This is Priya's kitchen. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking about your health," she said, crossing her arms. "All those spices. Who knows what they're doing to your stomach? I'm just looking out for you." "You're not," Ryan shot back. "You're disrespecting Priya. Again." But Linda wasn't listening. She'd already decided she was the victim in this situation, and nothing we said was going to change her mind. After Linda's confession, I stormed out of the house. Ryan offered to come with me to the grocery store, but I told him to stay and deal with his mom. I needed to cool off, and frankly, I didn't trust myself to be civil around her right then. The grocery store wasn't much better for my mood. As I walked down the aisles, I felt my frustration building. There were no bags of basmati rice, no lentils, and none of the spices I needed to replace the ones Linda had tossed. The shelves were fully stocked with canned goods and frozen dinners, but it wasn't the same. What made it worse was knowing how irreplaceable some of those items were. A lot of the ingredients Linda had thrown out weren't just things I could pick up at the local supermarket. The masalas, dried herbs, and specialty snacks. I'd gotten most of those from my parents and friends when they visited from India. My mom always packed a care package for me when she came, filled with homemade spice blends, dried red chilies, and pickles I couldn't find here. Those items weren't just food. They were pieces of home, little reminders of where I came from. Even when I did find certain Indian ingredients locally, it was always a hassle. The nearest Indian grocery store was over an hour away, and their stock wasn't consistent. Sometimes I'd drive all that way, only to find they were out of turmeric or asafoetida. And when I couldn't make the trip, I had to rely on online stores, which came with hefty shipping fees and the uncertainty of whether the items would arrive fresh. I thought about the small jar of garam masala my mom had sent me last year. It was her own special blend, made with spices she toasted and ground herself. Linda had probably dumped it in the trash without a second thought, like it was no different from a can of paprika. That jar wasn't just an ingredient. It was a gift from my mom, something she made with love. Knowing I couldn't replicate it here, I could feel my throat tighten as I pushed my cart through the store. How could someone be so thoughtless? Did Linda even realize how much she'd destroyed? Or did she just not care? I grabbed what I could, some pasta, canned tomatoes, and a loaf of bread. But it was a far cry from the vibrant, flavorful meals I was used to making. The absence of my usual ingredients felt like more than just an inconvenience. It felt like a part of me had been erased. When I got home, Linda was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. She didn't even look up as I walked past her with the groceries. "Did you get everything you need?" she asked casually, like she hadn't just ruined my entire kitchen. "No," I said flatly. "Well, I'm sure you'll manage," she said, turning a page. "You're resourceful." I slammed the pantry door shut and went upstairs to cool off. That evening, Ryan and I sat down to talk. I was still fuming, and he could tell. "She has to go," I said, not bothering to sugarcoat it. Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Priya, I know. What she did was completely out of line. I've already told her it's unacceptable." "It's not just about the groceries," I said. my voice shaking. She doesn't respect me, Ryan. She's made that clear from the start. And now she's treating me like a guest in my own home. Ryan nodded. You're right. She's crossed the line too many times. I'll call Lisa tomorrow and see if she can take her in. Lisa, 32 female, his sister, had offered to let Linda stay with her when this whole situation started, but Linda had refused. It's too far from my friends, she'd said at the time. Well, she can't stay here, I said firmly. Not after this. The next morning, Ryan sat Linda down for a serious talk. I stayed upstairs, not wanting to get dragged into the argument. I couldn't hear everything they said, but I caught bits and pieces. You can't just throw out someone else's food, Mom. This isn't your house. You need to respect our space. If you can't, then you'll have to leave. Linda's voice grew louder with every word. I was just trying to help, she shouted. And now you're throwing me out? After everything I've done for you? Ryan stayed calm but firm. We're not throwing you out, Mom. Lisa's already said she'd be happy to have you. It's not up for debate. By the time the conversation ended, Linda was fuming. She slammed her bedroom door and didn't come out for the rest of the day. That night, Ryan and I sat down to eat a simple dinner of pasta and canned soup. It wasn't what I'd planned, but it was enough. I'm sorry you had to deal with this, Ryan said, reaching for my hand. I promise this won't happen again. I nodded, grateful for his support. But deep down, I knew Linda wasn't going to go quietly. She never did. The next few days were going to be interesting, to say the least. Linda wasn't just entitled. She was spiteful. What began as an infuriating invasion of my kitchen escalated into something I never thought even she was capable of. The pantry debacle left me drained, but I tried to let it go for Ryan's sake. Then, a few days later, something happened that changed everything. I'd kept a small, beautifully crafted wooden box on the mantel in our living room. It contained the ashes of my older brother, Arjun, who had passed away in a car accident 5 years earlier. Losing him was the hardest thing my family and I had ever endured, and having that small piece of him close brought me comfort. The box was simple but special to me. It had been a gift from my parents, a way to honor Arjun's memory. They knew I couldn't visit his resting place often, so they'd entrusted me with part of his ashes to keep close. One evening, as I was tidying up the living room, I noticed the box was gone. I checked the mantel, thinking maybe it had been moved to the side, but it wasn't there. Panic set in as I searched the shelves, the coffee table, and even the floor. Ryan! I called out, my voice shaking. Where's the box? The one on the mantel? Ryan came into the room, frowning. What box? The one with Arjun's ashes, I said, my heart pounding. His face fell. I don't know. It should be there. That's when Linda walked in, casually sipping her tea. What's all the fuss about? She asked, looking completely unfazed. The box with my brother's ashes is missing, I said, turning to her. Have you seen it? Her expression didn't change. Oh, that old thing? I thought it was some kind of decorative trinket. I moved it when I was dusting. Maybe it's in one of the drawers? I searched every drawer, every shelf, every corner of the room. Nothing. Linda, I said, my voice trembling with anger. Where is it? This isn't just a decoration. It's my brother's ashes. If you moved it, tell me where it is. She looked at me with feigned innocence. I really don't know, Priya. Maybe you misplaced it. Misplaced it? I repeated, my voice rising. Linda, I didn't misplace anything. It was on the mantel and now it's gone. Did you throw it out? Her face hardened for a moment before she plastered on her fake smile. Why would I do that? You're being so dramatic. I'm sure it'll turn up somewhere. But it didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. Ryan tried to comfort me, but nothing he said could bring back what was lost. I knew in my gut that Linda had thrown away the box out of spite. It wasn't enough for her to erase my food or my traditions. She wanted to erase me. The next morning, Ryan confronted her. Mom, did you throw away Priya's brother's ashes? Linda gasped, clutching her chest like she was offended at the very suggestion. How could you accuse me of something so horrible? I would never do such a thing. Then where is it? Ryan pressed. I don't know, she snapped. Maybe Priya's memory isn't as good as she thinks it is. Her refusal to confess was the final straw for both of us. That evening, Ryan and I sat down to talk. He was angrier than I'd ever seen him. Priya, I know she did it. She'll never admit it. But I know. She needs to leave, I said firmly. Ryan, I can't live like this. I can't live with someone who disrespects me, my culture, my family. Someone who would destroy something so precious. Ryan nodded. She's gone. I'll call Lisa tomorrow and tell her to come get Mom. If she refuses to go to Lisa's, we'll find another solution. But she's not staying here another day. Linda didn't take the news well. She accused us of abandoning her, of being ungrateful for everything she'd done for Ryan, and even tried to guilt trip him by bringing up his childhood, but Ryan stood firm. "You've crossed every boundary, Mom," he said. "This isn't about family anymore. It's about respect, and you've shown none. You need to leave." By the end of the week, Linda was gone. Ryan and I spent hours cleaning the house, trying to rid it of the tension and toxicity she'd brought with her. But even though she was physically gone, her actions had left scars. The loss of my brother's ashes weighed heavily on me. Every time I walked past the mantle, I felt an ache in my chest. Ryan tried his best to console me, but there were no words that could undo the damage Linda had caused. Linda moved in with Ryan's sister Lisa, the same day she left our house. Lisa, bless her heart, had no idea what she was signing up for. She'd heard bits and pieces of what had happened, but assumed it was just typical family drama. She didn't yet understand the depths of Linda's entitlement and malice. At first, we heard nothing from Linda. No calls, no texts, no attempts to reach out. Part of me was relieved. I didn't want to hear her excuses or fake apologies. But I also knew Linda. Silence wasn't her style. She was too stubborn to admit fault, but she was also too prideful to stay quiet forever. About 2 weeks after Linda moved in with Lisa, we got a call. It wasn't from Linda, though. It was from Lisa. "Priya, can I talk to you?" Lisa's voice was hesitant, like she didn't quite know how to begin. "Of course," I said, my heart sinking. There was a long pause before Lisa spoke again. "Mom told me something, and I think you need to know." I braced myself. "What is it?" "She admitted to throwing out the box with your brother's ashes," Lisa said hesitantly, her voice quiet like she was struggling to even say the words. I froze, gripping the phone tighter. What? "She said she did it on purpose," Lisa continued, her tone filled with disgust. "She was upset that you and Ryan were making her leave. She felt like you were disrespecting her by not letting her stay in your home, so she decided to make a statement." My heart pounded, and my hands clenched into fists. "She threw away my brother's ashes as some kind of revenge?" I asked, my voice rising with each word. "Yes," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "She told me it was after the pantry cleanup. She said she knew what the box was, but she wanted to hurt you. She thought it would teach you a lesson for kicking her out." I felt the blood boiling in my veins, my breath coming in shallow bursts. "Teach me a lesson? By desecrating my brother's ashes? How could anyone do something so cruel?" Lisa's voice cracked. "I don't know, Priya. I don't know what's wrong with her. When she told me, I couldn't even look at her. I told her she was disgusting, and she just brushed it off like it wasn't a big deal. She's a monster," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "Lisa, I appreciate you telling me this, but I want nothing to do with her ever again. She's dead to me." Lisa sighed. "I understand. And for what it's worth, I don't think she deserves forgiveness for this. What she did is unforgivable." I thanked her, hung up the phone, and sat in silence, the weight of Linda's cruelty pressing down on me. This wasn't just a boundary crossed. It was the ultimate betrayal. Linda hadn't just disrespected me. She'd desecrated my family, my culture, and my grief. There was no coming back from this. Life slowly began to move on. Ryan and I focused on rebuilding our home and our relationship. We were stronger than ever, and cutting Linda out of our lives only brought us closer. Then, a few months later, something incredible happened. I found out I was pregnant. The news filled me with a joy I hadn't felt in years. Ryan was ecstatic, and we spent hours talking about baby names, nursery plans, and what kind of parents we wanted to be. For the first time in a long time, the future felt bright. We decided to keep the pregnancy quiet at first, sharing the news only with my family and a few close friends. I didn't want Linda to find out. Not yet, anyway. I knew how she'd react, and I wasn't ready to deal with her inevitable attempt to claw her way back into our lives. Unfortunately, secrets don't stay secret for long. Somehow, Linda found out about the pregnancy. I suspect Lisa let it slip during one of their conversations, though I don't blame her. Linda has a way of prying information out of people. The first sign of trouble was an email. "Dear Priya and Ryan, I just heard the wonderful news. I'm so thrilled to be a grandmother. Please let me know how I can help during this exciting time. I'd love to come over and talk about the baby. Love, Mom." I deleted the email without responding. Ryan read it over my shoulder and shook his head. "She's unbelievable," he muttered. The emails turned into texts, then phone calls. Linda tried every angle. Apologies, guilt trips, and even playing the victim. "I've been so lonely since I moved out," she said in one voicemail. "Can't we just move past this for the sake of the baby? I'm still Ryan's mother, after all." But for me, what Linda had done was unforgivable. Throwing away my brother's ashes wasn't just an act of disrespect. It was an act of cruelty, and while I could move forward with my life, I couldn't let her back into it. As my pregnancy progressed, Linda's attempts to reconnect became more desperate. She sent gifts to the house, baby clothes, toys, even a blanket she claimed she'd hand-knitted, though it still had the price tag on it. We returned everything unopened. One evening, Linda showed up at our door unannounced. Ryan answered, and I stayed in the living room, out of sight. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Ryan asked, his voice cold. "I just wanted to see you," Linda said. "And Priya, and the baby. Well, the bump, I guess." "You're not welcome here," Ryan said firmly. "You need to leave." "But I'm your mother," Linda said, her voice cracking. "You can't shut me out of my grandchild's life." Ryan didn't waver. "You shut yourself out when you threw away Priya's brother's ashes. That was the last straw. We're done, Mom." Linda tried to argue, but Ryan stood his ground. Eventually, she left, though not without tears, and another round of guilt-tripping. When our baby girl Maya was born, we didn't tell Linda. She found out eventually, probably through Lisa, but by then, we were clear about our boundaries. Maya would grow up in a home filled with love, respect, and kindness, not toxicity and manipulation. Linda tried to reconnect a few more times over the years, but we never let her back in. Some wounds run too deep, and forgiveness isn't always possible. Instead, we focused on building a life that honored the values we believed in. I made sure Maya grew up knowing about her uncle Arjun, even though she'd never meet him. We kept his memory alive through stories, photos, and a new box on the mantel, this time filled with letters and memories, a tribute to the brother I lost but would never forget. And as I watched Maya grow, surrounded by love and free from Linda's shadow, I knew we'd made the right choice. Some ties aren't worth mending, and some endings are the best beginnings.
"I'll be happy enough for both of us," my sister said, flaunting her stolen victory. She sent me an invitation to her wedding with John, clearly trying to show off. "But Mom and I will go," I replied. "We'll show her what a real spectacle looks like." Normally, my parents are kind and rarely get angry, but my sister's actions have pushed them to their limits. Attending her wedding with a fierce smile, we turned her celebration into a nightmare. I'm Hannah Turner, 24 years old, and I work as an illustrator. I'm newly married, not even a year in, and my relationship with my husband, John, is strong. We met through a friend and quickly started dating. He proposed at a restaurant with a stunning night view. Our wedding was blessed by family and friends, a ceremony filled with smiles. One day, as I was about to send John off to work, I noticed he had left his smartphone in the living room. I grabbed it and brought it to him. "John, you forgot your phone," I said, handing it over. He took it slightly panicked. "Thanks, that really helps. See you later." He rushed out. I felt something was off about his haste. That was the beginning. After that, John started to carry his smartphone with him at all times, even at home. Suspicious, but I couldn't believe John would cheat, right? We've been getting along well without any major issues, so I reassured myself that everything would be fine. However, my trust was soon shattered. After finishing hanging the laundry, I returned to the living room and noticed a notification on my phone. It was an email from an unknown account. "Hey, long time no see. How have you been?" It seemed like someone I knew, but I've heard of scams pretending to be acquaintances, so I decided to ignore it. If it was important, they'd call. I thought, "Hey, don't ignore me. I can see you've read it. Ignoring your sister. That's just like you, always so mean." The moment I closed my phone, it rang. The message was from the same unknown account, calling me sister. Indeed, I have a sister named Sally, but she's a troublemaker in many ways, such as financial issues. Sally often borrowed money from friends for various reasons and then cut off contact without repaying them, leading to my parents and me frequently facing the backlash. However, because she was their daughter, my parents ended up repaying her debts. Next, there were complaint issues. Sally would immediately lodge complaints over the smallest inconveniences. Her manner of complaining was terrible. She would hurl abuse and even force those who came to apologize to kneel, making her an extremely problematic customer. Then, there were issues with men. Sally loves men, particularly those who were taken. She didn't care if it was a friend or a family member. If she set her sights on a man, she pursued him. Indeed, this caused friction with friends, and the fallout often landed on my parents' doorstep. It's because of her behavior that I wanted nothing to do with Sally, and we had been out of touch since she left home. But there was the word sister in the smartphone message. If it was really her, I had a bad feeling and hesitated to reply, deciding to leave it be. Whether it was Sally or some imposter claiming to be my sister, I wanted no part of it. However, my phone kept pinging annoyingly until I decided to open it to block the sender. What I found was shocking. Ignore me all you want, but John is mine now. So hurry up and divorce him, okay? Thanks for finding such a great catch for me. From today, John won't be returning to you, so I'll send over the divorce papers. Make sure to file them quickly, accompanied by a photo of John and Sally together. I didn't need confirmation to know it was true. My hands trembled as I sat down, overwhelmed by shock to the point of feeling faint. Following Sally's words, John never returned home, and all I received was the filled-out divorce papers. Attempts to contact John were met with complete silence. Suddenly stripped of my happiness, I was overwhelmed with sadness and anger and became emotionally unstable. Why, John? I spent days in tears. After a few days of calming down, I decided to contact Sally. What's your intention? Let me talk to John. You've been ignoring me all this time, and now you contact me without even a hello or apology. What's your intention? Excuse me, you're the one who should be apologizing. Just send John back here for now. No way. He doesn't want to come back. He says he loves me far more than he ever loved you. And why should I apologize? It's your fault for not being able to keep him. No matter what I said, it just didn't get through. I was already in a terrible mental state, too tired to worry or think anymore. Enough. Finally realized it's hopeless. Clinging on will only make you more disliked, you know. If you're going to resent someone, resent your own lack of charm. Loser. After this exchange, I closed my phone. I was done dealing with Sally and had lost all affection for John, who had chosen her. Before I knew it, I had signed the divorce papers, and just like that, my once happy marriage came to an end. My life became a mess after that. Perhaps due to the severe mental damage, I struggled to eat, feeling more exhausted than usual. I looked so haggard that my coworkers were worried, and though I tried to assure them with a smile, it seemed my body and mind were reaching their limits. Eventually, I collapsed at work. Waking up in the emergency room, I found my parents and a close coworker by my side. "Hannah, can you recognize me?" "Hannah?" Hearing their voices brought me back to full consciousness. Looking around, I realized I was in a hospital. Recalling my last memory, oh, I collapsed, didn't I? My dad let out a sigh of relief. We were shocked when the hospital called. "Aren't you overworking yourself?" he suggested. But I knew the real reason. It was the stress from John and Sally. "Ah, maybe," I muttered, and my mom quickly pressed the nurse call button to summon a doctor. After being examined, they decided to keep me in the hospital for observation. "Are you eating properly? Getting enough rest?" My dad bombarded me with questions, worried while I assured him I was okay. My mom asked him to buy some drinks and anything I might be able to eat. He agreed and left the room. "Hey, Hannah, something's up, isn't it?" "I thought so too. You've looked worn out lately, and this has never happened before." Women are said to have keen intuition, and it seemed to be true. I sighed and told them both about everything that had happened. I found myself crying in the middle of explaining, realizing I had reached my limit without even knowing it. I thought I was okay with it all, but turns out I really don't understand myself. As I forced a laugh, my mom squeezed my hand tightly. "I had no idea all this was happening. Why didn't you tell us sooner? It's the first I've heard about the divorce. Sorry to say this in front of you, Mom, but is Sally out of her mind?" I can't believe it. Both of them showed their anger towards Sally, and I could feel they were genuinely worried about me. Didn't want to worry anyone, nor did I want to make a big deal out of it. I thought it was something I could overcome on my own. I didn't want to trouble or worry anyone around me. I felt embarrassed about the situation, and part of me believed what Sally had said might be true. Maybe it's my lack of appeal that caused all this. That's nonsense. What are you talking about? Anyone can see that Sally and your ex are the unbelievable ones. Natalie is right. You did nothing wrong. To think you were suffering all alone, I'm so sorry. Both looked like they were about to cry. I regretted not relying on those around me more. My mom suggested I come back home for a while, considering my mental and physical state. After the doctor also recommended rest, Natalie took care of the paperwork at work with my medical certificate. When my dad returned with drinks and heard about me resting at home, he immediately said I should come back. Later, Natalie managed to explain everything to my work, and HR told me, "You've got plenty of paid time off saved up, so take your time off to rest." After thanking Natalie, she told me she'd do whatever she could and that I should lean on her any time. Over the next few days, I stayed at my parents' house. Natalie occasionally visited, and I could tell my mind and body were gradually recovering. I realized that bottling things up really isn't good. Today, Natalie visited again, and as we were enjoying cake prepared by my mom, my phone rang. Curious, I opened it, and my heart raced. "Hey there, how are you doing? Thought you might be wondering about us, so I decided to reach out." It was Sally, who I hadn't spoken to since the fallout. I regretted letting my guard down and checking my phone. Natalie noticed the change in my expression. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "Oh yeah, I'm fine," I replied, but it was clear something was off. Natalie asked if she could see my phone. I didn't want to worry her, but I had just realized that bottling things up wasn't good, so I nodded and handed her my phone. Natalie looked puzzled as she read the message. "What's this? Is she picking a fight? This is Sally, right?" I nodded in response, and Natalie closed the phone. "Just ignore it. Actually, let's block her. No point in dealing with someone like this," she suggested, and I agreed, opening my phone to block Sally. Just then, another message from Sally came in. "We've been living together smoothly since then, and guess what? I got pregnant. You might be thinking already, but nope. John and I started our relationship 6 months ago." The word pregnant made time stop for me. We had been trying to conceive during our marriage. It would be great if we could be blessed with our baby soon. We used to say, making this message cut me deep. Tears started flowing, and Natalie, seeing me cry, took the phone from my hand. After reading the message, she yelled, "What? I can't believe this. I'm so mad I could explode. We should sue them." Suing was something I had considered when I first received the message, but now I didn't have the energy or will to pursue it. "I just don't want to deal with this anymore," I muttered, and Natalie calmed down. "Sorry I got too emotional. You're right, it's best not to get involved." Natalie's comforting back rub felt so kind, and I cried a bit more. Then my mom came into the living room, having seen what happened. "Hey, Hannah, actually, I haven't told your dad about this yet." I understood what that meant, knowing this would infuriate my dad. But I think it's time we told him. My mom's solemn words struck me deeply. I took a moment to think. I also believe it's time to talk about it. This is just too much, I concluded. Natalie's words convinced me to, so I decided to let my mom talk to them. My mom said she would talk about it, so I decided to leave it to her. After Natalie went home and it got dark, my dad returned from work. "Wow, smells good in here today, too. What's for dinner?" "Dad, welcome home." I'm back. According to Mom, Dad has been in a better mood since I came back home. Dad's usually not one to be in a bad mood, but he seems happy every day. And Mom told me how glad she was that I came back. Those words made me genuinely happy, grateful to have a place where I feel at peace. However, today Mom had a serious look on her face as she started a conversation with Dad. "Welcome home, Dad. I'd usually love to chat about the usual fun stuff, but there's something important we need to discuss." Seeing Mom's expression, Dad seemed to understand and turned serious too. Then, looking at me, he said, "It's about you, isn't it?" "Let's hear it." Dad's face was kind, and just looking at him almost made me cry. After explaining everything to Dad, his expression was calm, but carried an air of anger, almost frightening. "I see. Hannah, for now, don't block her yet." "Huh. You have to read the messages, but wait on blocking her," Dad advised, and I nodded, understanding he must have his reasons. Mom tends to accept Dad's opinions in situations like this. "For now, Hannah, don't block Sally, and if she contacts you, just don't read it. It might be good to let Natalie know, too." "Understood. Thanks for telling us, Hannah. You're okay. You've got your dad and Mom here for you, and Natalie, too." Dad and Mom's kind words and smiles made me so happy. I ended up crying with relief. Seeing this, both my parents laughed, and my heart felt incredibly warm. That night, I told Natalie, and she said, "It's great you have such supportive parents, and you've got me too." Looked up at the night sky, truly feeling it. After further discussions, I decided to move back home. Moving meant returning to my parents' house, since the office is within commuting distance from their home. Natalie suggested it might be better for my mental health than staying in a house filled with bad memories. The rental contract was in my name, so I took care of the cancellation and sent John's belongings to his parents' house. On the day of the move, I also took care of the mail forwarding at the post office and successfully completed the move. I said goodbye to the landlord with a smile, able to leave on good terms. So I started living at my parents' house again and successfully returned to work. My colleagues were very worried, but I could now answer them with a genuine smile, saying, "I'm okay." My boss also told me not to overdo it, making me realize once again what a great workplace I have. A few months later, I'm home. As I got home, my mom greeted me with a serious face. "Welcome back, Hannah. There's something we need to talk about. Come to the living room as soon as you've changed." "Oh, okay. Understood." I predicted something was up from my mom's serious expression. I changed into my casual clothes and went to the living room where my parents were sitting with a puzzled look over a letter. I hesitantly took a seat in front of them and saw the letter placed before me. "An invitation," I muttered, and Dad said, "Yes." It appeared to be a wedding invitation, but what could be the problem with it? "Can I see it?" "Yes, you can." I took the invitation in my hand. The sender was unbelievably Sally and John. "What?" My voice escaped me in shock. "You filed a forwarding address because you moved, right? This was sent to your house." "That's right." No wonder both their faces looked grim. However, surprisingly, I felt calm. If this had happened before, I would have definitely been shocked, but now I just felt disdain. "Are you okay?" my mom asked, concerned. Dad was also looking at me. Somehow, I'm much better than I thought I'd be seeing this. I can only feel disdain, though I do wonder how far they want to demean me. Right, even if she's my daughter, this is beyond what I can tolerate. I'm glad Hannah isn't as shocked as we feared, but still, this is going too far. I could see flames behind my parents. I'm grateful for my dad and mom who are angry for my sake. "It's addressed to me. I don't have to go, right?" I asked, and my parents looked me straight in the eye. "Mom and I will go." "What?" "We'll show them what hell looks like." "What?" Seeing my usually gentle parents this angry was a first for me, and it made me uneasy. "But this is addressed to me." "Well, we are the parents of the bride. It would be rude not to attend, right?" "Exactly. Our daughter's wedding. Looking forward to it." "Mom, yes, really." My parents exchanged smiles. I could only give her our smile. When I told Natalie about it, she didn't seem surprised at all. Aren't your parents right? If you're related to the bride and groom, you have to attend. But wow, a wedding, huh? I could tell she was smirking even over the phone. Everyone around me is strong, but they're also scary when injured. On the day of the wedding. Are you really going? Are you sure? Watching my parents prepare to attend the wedding, I asked anxiously. Why worry? There's nothing to be concerned about, my mom said with a smile, but her eyes weren't smiling, which made me nervous. Dad had a similar reaction, dismissing my worries as they continued their preparations. I hoped it was okay ignoring my concerns. The sound of a car arriving could be heard. I went to check if they had called a taxi, only to find a familiar car parked outside. And who should get out but Natalie? Natalie, what are you doing here? Blurted out as I opened the door, seeing her dressed in a party dress, looking glamorous. Good morning, are your dad and mom ready? No, answer my question. What? I'm attending the wedding too. What? I was shocked by Natalie's statement. When my parents came out of the house, I asked them what was going on. It turned out that one of John's relatives is a friend of Natalie's, and after learning about the situation, she was invited to attend as his relative's girlfriend. My parents didn't object. Instead, they seemed enthusiastic about going together. As I wondered what they were thinking, Natalie said, I can't just stay quiet after what happened to Hannah. You understand, right? Though I was anxious, I agreed. Then my parents and Natalie left for the venue in the same car. I felt maybe I should go too, but Natalie seemed to read my mind and said, If you want to see, I can show you through a video call. I decided to stay home and rely on them. Curiosity got the better of me, so I contacted Natalie for a video call. Upon arriving at the venue, my parents and Natalie went to the reception. Natalie was listed thanks to John's relatives' arrangement, but my parents weren't on the guest list since they weren't invited. The receptionist went to confirm their names, and then Sally appeared. Sally was surprised to see my parents and couldn't hide her confusion. Why are you here? Why, we're the parents. It's natural for us to come. There was some mistake, and we didn't receive an invitation, my parents said, which made Sally force a smile. The invitation was meant for Hannah. Yes, we were surprised when Hannah told us. We had no idea about the wedding. Since Hannah couldn't make it today because of work, we came instead. Sending an invitation to Hannah is fine, but you should have sent one to us too. It wouldn't look good without the bride's parents, right? My dad mentioned the lack of invitation twice. Although I couldn't see my parents' expressions through the video call Natalie was sharing, I could imagine. Right, yes, I am your daughter after all. Of course, you'd be happy. Sally seemed to genuinely believe my parents came for her sake. I thought she was delusional. Then John appeared. He turned pale at the sight of my parents. Relax, John. They came to celebrate with us. They must really love me, especially since Hannah is like that. Sally reassured John, who seemed relieved, and greeted my parents with a smile. John's parents also joined in, and the atmosphere became friendly and warm. Seeing my former in-laws chatting happily, a memory of being fondly cared for by them stung a bit. I wondered if they were only nice to me because I was their son's wife, which was a bit shocking. Maybe it was indeed the right decision not to go, I murmured. Then the scene shifted to the ceremony and then to the reception. At the reception, Sally and John made a happy entrance. Natalie occasionally asked me if I was okay, but I was surprisingly fine watching the two of them. Responding, I'm okay. More than anything, I was worried about my phone's battery, but she reassured me she had a portable charger. Well prepared indeed. When it came time to read the letter of gratitude to the parents, Sally started panicking because she hadn't expected her parents to come. Seeing this, my parents asked the MC for the microphone. Today, we weren't actually supposed to come, so it's understandable that Sally wasn't prepared. As a surprise from us, we'd like to convey a message to our daughter, Sally. The venue erupted in applause. Sally, seemingly relieved by the save, smirked and clapped. "Dad, I'm so happy." Her exaggerated gratitude was irritating. I continued watching, feeling uncomfortable. My dad then started something unbelievable with a smile. "Our surprise from us to you is this," he announced, and suddenly the doors of the reception hall opened, revealing several men standing there, all looking outraged. I watched over the scene, wondering what was going to happen. Sally turned pale at the sight of them. Our Sally is so charming that she has received affection from many men. The kind Sally has responded to all these feelings, making her our pride and joy. And today these gentlemen wanted to give us a prize, so we brought them here. "Wait, Dad, how did you know?" "Sally, I had no idea you were so considerate. Now, gratefully accept this surprise," my dad initiated, leading to the men storming the stage, expressing their anger. Sally tried to escape, but was confronted with accusations like, "What do you mean you're marrying someone else? How much do you think I've spent on you? Pay back the money you borrowed." Sally turned pale and was nearly in tears. Watching this, Natalie coolly commented, "Wow," while I was stunned. John, confronting Sally with a "what's going on," found her too shocked and flustered to respond. Then my mom took the microphone and began to speak. "Actually, there's one more surprise. As my husband mentioned earlier, our daughter Sally is very charming, so much so that she's also popular among women." As Mom said this, several women in attendance stood up. "We've invited those who expressed a desire to meet Sally." Following my mom's words, the women approached Sally. "How dare you steal my man and then try to be happy yourself? Pay me the alimony for cheating with my husband. You cut off contact as soon as I lent you money. Pay me back." The situation turned into chaos. The reception hall went from buzzing to downright hellish. I imagine the other guests must be shocked, but they seemed more disgusted than anything. Seeing my parents smiling through this chaos was frightening, and I realized this is the kind of reputation my sister had. In the midst of this uproar, someone took the microphone. "Sally, to have such an attractive person as our son's bride is truly heartwarming." To my surprise, it was my former mother-in-law making an unexpected statement. As I wondered what she was talking about, she continued, "It might not compare to the wonderful surprise prepared by Sally's parents, but we also have a surprise for you." John looked shocked by his mother's words. "What are you talking about, Mom? Can't you see what's happening?" Ignoring John's attempt to calm the situation, my former father-in-law took the microphone. "First, we'd like to thank Mr. and Mrs. Sally's parents for such an appropriate surprise. Actually, I run a business, and we've decided to remove John from his successor position. This is our surprise for you." "What?" Sally and John were astonished. I had heard during their marriage about John being groomed as a successor. His dad's announcement was shocking. "What are you saying, Dad? You've made your own choices, cheated by your own will, divorced by your own will, and remarried by your own will. Someone who can make such commendable decisions should start your own business rather than take over mine. Don't decide on your own. You said I was the successor." John's eyes widened in panic. "No, we are serious. You're already splendidly independent. Use that judgment to live your life from now on together with the wonderful Sally." "Exactly. Having a son who can make such self-centered decisions, I couldn't be prouder." My jaw dropped. My former in-laws seemed to be laughing like my parents, but their eyes weren't smiling. They seemed pretty angry. Natalie was chuckling upon hearing this. Serves them right. I can barely hold back my laughter. "I'm just speechless," I said, and Natalie filled me in on what had happened while I was away. My former in-laws had come to apologize. They really thought of me as their own daughter, and my parents and they had planned this surprise revenge together. Natalie had been in touch with my parents and had also heard the story from John's relatives, so she knew everything. Hearing this made me tear up, realizing I had so many people on my side. "You're not alone. So many people care about you, Hannah. How could we stay silent when someone important to us is hurt? Yeah. I cried and couldn't speak properly, just nodded. Thank you. When I finally managed to say thank you, I saw my parents and former in-laws smiling kindly at me through the screen. The chaos continued at the venue with the staff trying to intervene in the disastrous situation. Then a man stood up and walked towards the stage. He stood in front of John, and John collapsed to his knees, apparently after being told something by the man. The man returned to his seat. Hey, what did that man say? Can't really tell from this distance unless he uses a mic. Maybe I should go ask him directly, Natalie said and moved towards the man with her phone. Excuse me. As Natalie approached, the man turned around. I was startled. Uncle on. Yes, it was my dad's brother, my uncle. Natalie showed him the screen, and seeing me, my uncle was surprised and very happy. Hannah, are you doing all right? I heard about today from your dad. It must have been tough. Thanks for worrying about me, but I'm okay. By the way, what did you say to John just now? That this hotel is run by me, so I told him I'll be claiming damages. The reception hall is a mess because of the bride and groom. Hearing my uncle's words, both Natalie and I understood. That's why John turned pale. After talking with my uncle for a bit, I felt encouraged again. Trying to see Sally through the camera proved difficult due to the crowd of people surrounding her. This wedding had become anything but a celebration. Looking around, many guests had started to leave. Among them were some of John's colleagues I recognized. Even that colleague left the venue with a puzzled expression. I thought to myself, well, that figures, feeling somewhat relieved. The wedding ended in disaster, with Sally and John looking pale and exhausted. And now the bride and groom will exit, the MC announced, but by then, almost all the attendees had left. The only ones clapping were our parents, former in-laws, Natalie, and some of John's relatives. When my parents returned home, I went out to greet them. Surprisingly, Natalie and John's parents were with them. I was a bit shocked, but bowed to my former in-laws. I'm sorry for not being in touch. I regret that our marriage ended this way despite your kindness. I've been feeling guilty for not apologizing to my former in-laws after the divorce, so I took this opportunity. My former in-laws, with tears in their eyes, placed their hands on my shoulders. We should be the ones apologizing, they said, but I insisted it was unnecessary and thanked them for their care during the marriage. After that, we all had tea and chatted happily, thanking each other for the wedding events, and parted on good terms. Felt like I finally had closure and felt refreshed. A few days later, my phone rang during work. It was a message from Sally. I had forgotten to block her, but upon checking, it was a barrage of complaints. Your fault, our wedding was ruined. Take responsibility. You told our parents, didn't you? Jealous much. Don't project your unhappiness on me. Pathetic loser. I pondered for a moment, then asked Natalie, who was at the next desk, can I still claim alimony for the affair? Easy. She's been sending enough evidence herself, right? Feeling completely over it, I decided to hire a lawyer to claim alimony. I saved all the exchanges and images sent by Sally and replied to her, thanks for all the evidence of the affair. A lawyer will be in touch, so please stop contacting me directly. A lawyer? What are you thinking? Stop it. Sally started deleting the messages and images she had sent. After telling Sally that all evidence was saved, she visibly panicked and started apologizing. Sorry, it was all lies. I'll give John back since he's no longer going to be the CEO, and I won't say anything terrible anymore. Please spare me the alimony. I already have debts as it is. That's none of my concern. I don't want John, and well, do whatever you like. Actually, it might have been good that you took him. I don't need a man who cheats, and in the end, you protected me. Thanks, sis. I sent that and cut off contact. After blocking Sally, she tried to reach out from different accounts, but I'd blocked those too. I consulted with the lawyer I was referred to and submitted the evidence. They were quick to act on it. Next, I started receiving messages from John. Perhaps things weren't going well with Sally. He sent me creepy messages like a Romeo. I ignored and also blocked. My parents handled it when he tried to contact the house, wanting to talk to me. Apparently frightened by my parents, he hasn't contacted me since. Later, the lawyer informed me that John and Sally had agreed to pay the alimony. They tried to fight it with Sally's usual complaint tactics, but that doesn't work on a lawyer. Realizing they had no chance, they accepted defeat dejectedly. John, initially resistant, turned pale and gave in after learning Sally had sent me plenty of evidence. Despite the bitter feelings from being tormented by such childish individuals, I'm now only grateful for the many people who protected me. Sally and John eventually divorced. Sally, having no one to rely on, contacted our house once, but my parents made an estrangement declaration. It said that she hung up the phone while crying. John, rumored about the wedding at work, found it uncomfortable and resigned. Unable to return home, he's now surviving on part-time jobs. As for me, I received a promotion at work due to high performance. I began dating someone new in my department, hoping for a bright future. Natalie also connected with one of John's relatives, and we often swap our love stories. Next month, to celebrate, my parents, Natalie, and even my former in-laws are planning a trip to the hot springs together. After hitting rock bottom, I feel happier than ever.
I never had that special sisterly bond you see in movies or read about in books. Jessica was already 10 years old when I came along, practically a different generation. While she was experiencing her first crushes in high school, I was still playing with dolls. Our parents, like many who have children far apart, seemed to hold a special place in their hearts for their firstborn. Jessica could do no wrong in their eyes, and that pattern continued well into our adult years. When I turned 18 and started college in our hometown, Jessica was getting married to David, a local accountant she'd met at church. I remember her wedding day clearly. She was glowing with happiness, and our parents couldn't stop crying tears of joy. I was just relieved I could live at home while attending college to save money. Little did I know what that decision would cost me. Jessica wasted no time settling into her role as a housewife. Within months of the wedding, she announced her pregnancy. "Isn't it wonderful, Robin?" she gushed. "You're going to be an aunt." I smiled and nodded, not realizing this announcement would completely derail my college experience. 3 months after little Tommy was born, Jessica started showing up at our parents' house unannounced. "I just need a break," she'd say, practically throwing Tommy into Mom's arms. "I'll be back in a few hours. Robin's home anyway, she can help." I'd be in my room, surrounded by textbooks and notes, when Mom would knock on my door. "Robin, honey, could you watch Tommy while I make dinner?" It became a daily routine. My study time was constantly interrupted by a crying baby and my mother's gentle but persistent requests for help. I tried to balance everything, but it was exhausting. Then, just when I thought I had somewhat adjusted to the situation, Jessica dropped another bombshell during Sunday dinner. "We're having another baby," she announced. "Tommy's going to be a big brother." 2 years later, I was in my final year of college, trying desperately to prepare for my exams while dealing with both 3-year-old Tommy running wild through the house and baby Michael screaming at the top of his lungs. "Jessica," I said one afternoon, after she'd dropped both kids off so she could go to the movies with her friends, "have you considered hiring a babysitter?" She looked at me like I'd suggested she sell her children. "Do you know how expensive babysitters are these days?" she scoffed. "Besides, why should we pay someone when we have family who can watch them for free?" Our mother, who was currently chasing Tommy as he ran through the house with her reading glasses, just nodded absently. Of course she didn't mind. Jessica was her precious firstborn, and she'd never deny her anything. Meanwhile, our house had turned into complete chaos. Tommy treated every room like his personal playground, leaving a trail of destruction wherever he went. One morning, I woke up to find he'd emptied all my college folders onto the floor and used my notes as drawing paper. Baby Michael's piercing screams provided a constant soundtrack to the mayhem. "Robin," Mom called out one afternoon, her voice strained. "Please come help with the boys. I can't handle them anymore today." I heard something crash downstairs, followed by Tommy's gleeful giggling. "I can't, Mom," I shouted back through my locked door. "I have finals next week." "You're being selfish." Dad's voice joined the chaos. "These are your nephews. Family helps family." I turned up my music to drown out their voices and the sound of another crash downstairs. My hands were shaking as I highlighted important passages in my textbook. I felt guilty, but I also knew that if I didn't pass these exams, my whole future would be affected. The next few weeks were tense, but I managed to graduate with honors despite the constant disruptions. My first priority after securing a job at Anderson & Associates was finding my own place. The starting salary wasn't huge, but it was enough to rent a small one-bedroom apartment across town. That first night in my apartment was the most peaceful I'd experienced in years. No screaming, no crying, no chaos, just blessed silence. 2 years passed, and I'd managed to create a comfortable life for myself. Then came the news of Jessica's third pregnancy. "It's another boy," Mom told me during one of our weekly phone calls. "Isn't it wonderful?" "Yeah, wonderful," I said, already imagining the increased chaos. "How are you and Dad handling Tommy and Michael these days?" Mom sighed. "They're energetic. Jessica still brings them over every weekend. Says she needs a break. Now with another baby coming." Her voice trailed off, and I could hear the exhaustion she was trying to hide. During my next visit home, I found my parents looking older than their years. Tommy and Michael were racing through the house, playing some game that seemed to involve throwing all the couch cushions on the floor. Jessica had just dropped them off before heading to brunch with friends. "Mom, Dad," I said carefully, watching them chase after the boys, "you know you don't have to do this, right? You can say no to Jessica." Dad turned to me, his face red with either exertion or anger. "That's such a selfish thing to say, Robin. This is what family does." "There's nothing selfish about setting boundaries," I argued. "You both look exhausted." "You don't understand what family means," Mom snapped, even as she picked up another cushion from the floor. "You've never understood. When you have children of your own, you'll get it." I left their house that day feeling frustrated and sad. It seemed like nothing had changed. Jessica was still taking advantage, our parents were still enabling her, and I was still the bad guy for pointing out the obvious. Over time, my weekend visits home became increasingly difficult to endure. Each time I walked through my parents' door, I found myself stepping into what felt like a war zone. Tommy, now 5, and Michael, 3, had developed a particularly nasty habit of turning mealtimes into food fights, with 6-month-old Kevin, their youngest brother, usually ending up as their unwilling target. One Sunday lunch was especially horrible. I watched in horror as Tommy loaded his spoon with mashed potatoes and launched it across the table at Michael, who retaliated with a handful of green peas. Kevin, caught in the crossfire, ended up with baby food dripping down his face, sobbing while his older brothers laughed. I couldn't take it anymore. "Enough." I slammed my hand on the table, making everyone jump. "Tommy, Michael, get over here right now." They stared at me, unused to being confronted. "Look at this mess you've made," I pointed to the food-splattered floor and walls. "And look at your brother crying. This is unacceptable. You're going to clean this up, now." To everyone's surprise, including my own, they actually started cleaning. Maybe it was the shock of someone finally standing up to them. That's when Jessica burst through the door, returning from her weekly spa appointment. "What's going on here?" she demanded, seeing her older boys on their hands and knees wiping the floor. "They made a mess at lunch," I explained. "They're cleaning it up." Jessica's face turned red. How dare you? They're just children. You're being cruel to them. Cruel? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jessica, they were throwing food at Kevin. He was crying. This isn't okay behavior. You don't have children, she spat. You don't understand anything. I looked at our parents, hoping they'd back me up, but they just sat there, looking tired and defeated. I couldn't understand why they wouldn't stand up to Jessica, why they kept letting her take advantage of their kindness. Life went on like this for 3 more years, with me limiting my visits home to avoid the chaos. Then everything changed when I met James. He was nothing like anyone I'd dated before. Smart, kind, and most importantly, he understood the importance of boundaries. We met at a coffee shop near my office. He'd accidentally taken my latte, and we ended up talking for hours. After 6 months of dating, we introduced each other to our families. His parents, Robert and Diana, were lovely people who raised their voices about as often as they burned dinner, which was never. The contrast between their peaceful home and my parents' chaos was striking. Christmas had always been a big deal in our family, and this year was supposed to be extra special since James and I were newly engaged. Mom went all out with the decorations. The tree was beautiful, presents were wrapped perfectly in matching paper, and the house smelled amazing with all her holiday baking. When James and I arrived early to help, the atmosphere was festive and warm. My cousins Mark and Sarah were already there with their kids, who were quietly playing board games in the corner. Several of our relatives had traveled from out of town, including Great-Aunt Martha, who immediately pulled me into a tight hug. "Let me see that ring, dear," she said, admiring my engagement ring. "James is such a lovely young man. You two will be so happy together." Everything was picture perfect. Mom had outdone herself with the food, Dad was telling his favorite stories, and even the kids were well behaved, saying please and thank you when offered cookies. It felt like a scene from a Christmas movie. Then the front door burst open. "Merry Christmas!" Jessica's voice rang out, but it was immediately drowned by the sound of her 3 boys storming into the house like a hurricane. Tommy, now 8, immediately ran straight into Great-Uncle George, nearly knocking him over. Michael, 6, started chasing his cousins, who had been quietly reading on the couch. 3-year-old Kevin was screaming at the top of his lungs, for no apparent reason. "Boys will be boys," Jessica laughed, while her husband David stared at his phone, completely checked out of the situation. Before anyone could stop them, Tommy and Michael discovered the presents under the tree. They didn't just look at them or shake them, they started ripping them open. All of them. Even the ones that weren't for them. "Oh my goodness," Great-Aunt Martha gasped as Tommy tore through a carefully wrapped package meant for my cousin's daughter. "I think I need to leave. This is too much excitement for me." She wasn't the only one. Within 20 minutes, half of our elderly relatives had made their excuses and left, unable to handle the chaos that my nephews were creating. The dinner that followed was even worse. My cousin's children sat quietly, using their napkins and waiting their turns to speak. In stark contrast, my nephews turned the dinner table into a battlefield. Tommy and Michael were throwing dinner rolls at each other across the table, while Kevin was smearing cranberry sauce in his hair. "Children, please," Mom pleaded weakly, but they ignored her completely. The breaking point came when Tommy, with a mischievous grin, deliberately picked up his can of soda and poured it all over Mom's special Christmas pie, the one she'd spent hours making that morning. "Tommy," several voices shouted at once. But Jessica just laughed. "He's just being playful," she said, while David continued scrolling on his phone. I looked around the table at my relatives' faces, the shock, the disapproval, the discomfort, while my sister and her husband sat there acting like this was perfectly normal behavior. I couldn't take it anymore. The sight of my mother's ruined pie, the chaos, the complete lack of discipline, it was all too much. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "I can't stay here," I announced, my voice shaking with anger. "This is ridiculous. Your children are behaving disgustingly, Jessica, and you're doing nothing about it." The table fell silent, except for the sound of Kevin banging his spoon against his plate. Jessica's face turned red. "Oh, that's rich coming from you," she snapped. "You don't have children, Robin. You have no idea how hard it is to raise kids. When you have your own, then you can judge my parenting." I let out a bitter laugh and gestured toward my cousin's children, who were sitting quietly, looking uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Really? Then how do you explain them? Sarah and Mark's kids have been perfectly well behaved all day. They use their manners, they don't destroy things, they don't throw food. How is that possible if children are supposedly impossible to control?" "Those kids are just different," Jessica sputtered. "No, the difference is that Sarah and Mark actually parent their children," I shot back. "When was the last time you made your kids face any consequences for their actions?" Jessica's eyes welled up with tears. "You're so cruel. You've always hated my children." "I don't hate them," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I hate watching them grow up without any guidance or discipline. I hate seeing Mom and Dad's house destroyed every time you visit. I hate that you think this behavior is normal." James stood up beside me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "I think we should go," he said quietly. Jessica was full-on crying now, while her boys continued their chaos, completely unfazed by the drama unfolding around them. David finally looked up from his phone, seeming mildly annoyed by the disruption. "Merry Christmas, everyone," I said, my voice thick with sarcasm. "Sorry, Mom, but I just can't watch this anymore." James and I left to the sound of Jessica's sobs and Tommy's triumphant yell as he launched another dinner roll across the room. 2 months later, we were sitting in our apartment, working on the wedding guest list. The Christmas disaster was still fresh in our minds as we looked at the names. "We can't invite the boys," I said finally, voicing what we were both thinking. "They'll ruin everything." "Can you imagine them during the ceremony? During the reception?" James nodded. "What if we just make it completely child-free? No kids under 16, period. That way it's not personal, it's just a blanket policy." "You don't think people will be offended?" "Some might be," he admitted. "But if it applies to everyone equally, it's harder to argue with. Sarah and Mark might be disappointed their kids can't come, but at least they'll understand it's not targeted at them specifically." I thought about the peaceful ceremony we'd been planning. No chaos, no food fights, no screaming children. Just an elegant celebration of our love, surrounded by mature guests who could actually appreciate the moment. "A child-free wedding," I repeated, trying out the words. "You know what? I actually love it." I chose a Sunday afternoon to break the news to my family. In retrospect, maybe I should have done it when Jessica and her kids weren't there, but finding them absent from our parents' house was like trying to catch lightning in a bottle. As soon as I walked in, I had to dodge a remote control flying through the air, thrown by Tommy while chasing Michael. Kevin was crying on the floor because his brothers had knocked over his blocks for the 3rd time. "Mom, Dad," I started, raising my voice over the chaos. "Jessica, I need to talk to you all about the wedding." "Sure, honey," Mom said, trying to clean up juice that Kevin had spilled on the carpet. I took a deep breath. "James and I have decided to make the wedding child-free. No children under 16 will be attending." The chaos stopped for approximately 2 seconds before Jessica erupted. "What?" she screamed, jumping up from the couch. "You can't do that." "What about my boys?" "The policy applies to all children," I explained, trying to keep my voice calm. "Not just yours. This is because you hate them." Jessica was turning red now, her voice getting louder with each word. "You've always hated my children. You're a horrible aunt, a horrible sister." "No, I love your boys," I insisted, even as Tommy chose that moment to knock over a vase. "But you saw what happened at Christmas. The food fights, the presents being torn open, the ruined pie. That was just kids being kids." "No, Jessica, it wasn't. Mark and Sarah's kids were there too, remember? They didn't destroy anything. They didn't ruin Christmas for everyone else." Oh, here we go again with the perfect cousin's perfect children, Jessica screamed. Well, you know what? You won't have to worry about my disruptive children at your precious wedding, because we won't be there at all. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. That's your choice, I said quietly. If you'd rather not come to my wedding than attend without your children, that's up to you. Jessica stared at me for a moment, her mouth open in shock. Then she started gathering her kids' things, shoving toys into bags. Come on, boys, she yelled. We're leaving. Your Aunt Robin doesn't want you in her life anymore. That's not what I said, I started, but she was already herding the boys toward the door. I hope you're happy with your perfect, quiet wedding, she spat over her shoulder. Then she slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. After Jessica stormed out, I turned to my parents, expecting to find understanding in their faces. After all, they'd been dealing with my nephew's chaos for years. Instead, I found them looking at me with disappointment. How could you, Robin? Mom's voice was quiet but sharp. Those are your nephews. Mom, you've seen how they behave, I said, incredulous. You saw what happened at Christmas. They're just children, Dad jumped in. You're being incredibly selfish. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Selfish? How is it selfish to want my wedding day to be peaceful? One day that I want to be perfect, without food fights or screaming or chaos. Dad's face hardened. Then you need to reconsider your decision. Either invite your nephews, or we won't be attending either. The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked at their faces, these parents who had watched their house be destroyed countless times, who looked older than their years from the stress of handling 3 unruly boys, who were now threatening to miss their younger daughter's wedding because she wanted one peaceful day. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. That's your choice, don't come. I left their house and drove straight to James's place. When I told him and his parents what had happened, they immediately rallied around me. You're absolutely right to want a peaceful wedding, Diana, my future mother-in-law, assured me. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty about that. That evening, I made it official. I posted the announcement on Facebook. James and I are excited to announce that our wedding will be a child-free celebration. We look forward to sharing our special day with our adult guests in an elegant, peaceful atmosphere. The support was overwhelming. Cousins, friends, and even distant relatives liked and commented with their approval. Sarah, my cousin, wrote, "Completely understand. We'll arrange a sitter for the kids. Can't wait to celebrate with you." Then Jessica commented, "Shame on you, Robin. You're tearing this family apart with your selfishness. You've always been jealous of my children and now you're excluding them from this important family event. I hope you're happy with yourself." The response was immediate and unexpected. Relatives who had witnessed the Christmas disaster jumped to my defense. "Jessica, your kids destroyed the Christmas celebration," Aunt Linda wrote. "They ruined presents that weren't theirs, threw food, and drove half the family to leave early. Maybe instead of attacking Robin, you should focus on teaching your children how to behave in public," Great Aunt Martha chimed in. Comment after comment appeared, each one recounting another instance of my nephew's bad behavior and Jessica's lack of parenting. The post turned into a catalog of years of chaos and destruction, all of which Jessica had dismissed or ignored. Jessica's responses stopped abruptly. For once, she had nothing to say in defense of her children's behavior, perhaps because, for the first time, she was facing unified opposition from the entire family. My phone rang 3 days after the Facebook post explosion. When I saw Mom on the caller ID, my stomach tightened, but I answered anyway. "Robin?" Mom's voice was soft. "Your father and we saw your post. And all the comments. We had no idea so many people felt this way. Seeing everyone describe what happened at Christmas, and all the other occasions. We'll be at your wedding, honey," Dad chimed in. "With or without your sister. You deserve your perfect day." The relief was overwhelming. "Thank you," I managed to say through my tears. "That means everything to me." After that conversation, I sent Jessica and David a formal wedding invitation with a handwritten note. I would love to have you both there to celebrate with us. I know it's difficult without the boys, but this is important to me. Love, Robin. Weeks passed without a response. As the RSVPs rolled in, Jessica's silence became her answer. The wedding day itself was everything I'd dreamed of. The ceremony was peaceful and elegant, without a single interruption. During the reception, adults could actually have conversations without shouting over chaos. No food was thrown, no decorations were destroyed, no one cried except my mom, happy tears as she watched us exchange our vows. "This is lovely," Great Aunt Martha told me during the reception. "So dignified, so peaceful." James squeezed my hand under the table. He knew I was thinking about the empty seats where Jessica and David should have been. A week after we returned from our honeymoon, Mom called with news. "Jessica hasn't brought the boys over since your wedding," she said. "I tried to call her, but she won't answer." "She's punishing you for coming to my wedding," I said quietly. "Maybe," Mom sighed. "But you know what? For the first time in years, your father and I feel rested. Our house is still clean at the end of the day. Maybe this isn't entirely a bad thing." I understood what she meant. Sometimes relationships need to break before they can be rebuilt properly. Perhaps this was our family's breaking point, the moment when we finally stopped pretending everything was fine and acknowledged the problems that had been growing for years. I still hope that one day Jessica will understand that my wedding wasn't about excluding her children, it was about having one day of peace. I hope she'll realize that her boys' behavior isn't normal or acceptable, and that letting them run wild isn't doing them any favors. I hope that someday we can rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. Until then, I have my memories of a perfect wedding day, surrounded by people who understood and supported my choice. I have my new husband and his loving family. And I have the knowledge that sometimes standing up for yourself, even when it's difficult, even when it hurts, is the right thing to do.